US and NATO allies have quickly slapped sanctions on Russia for its recognition of separatist states in Ukraine and its planned use of so-called peacekeepers in the region. The U.S. fears this is the first step in a full-blown invasion of the country.
The Ukrainian foreign minister is in Washington today, meeting with Secretary of State Antony Blinken and Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin to go over the next steps in the crisis. Joining us now is former U.S. Ambassador to NATO, Ivo Daalder. He is also the president of the Chicago Council on Global Affairs. Ambassador Daalder, welcome. How is President Putin able to just officially recognize these breakaway regions in eastern Ukraine? How does that work exactly?
Well, it works just by doing it, but it has no meaning internationally. This is an old Russian trick. Remember, it happened in Georgia as well in 2008 when the Russians invaded Georgia. Two breakaway regions, Abkhazia and South Ossetia, were then at that point recognized as independent states, but only recognized by Moscow. Now the same is happening with these two republics in Ukraine, Luhansk and Donetsk. And they are now recognized, but only by Moscow as independent. It means nothing under international law, but it gives Putin the pretext to do what he wanted to do, which is to invade Ukraine. And that's what's happening just as we are speaking here.
Ambassador, the Kremlin has repeatedly said they had no plans to invade Ukraine. Now there's Russian troops in the eastern region of the country on what the Kremlin's calling a peacekeeping mission. Let's just be clear, in your view, is this action akin to an attack on Ukraine?
It's totally akin to an attack on Ukraine. It's just a continuation of a war that the Russians have been conducting since 2014. Remember, at that point, little green men showed up in Crimea and they took over the peninsula there and annexed it as part of Russia. They then started this war in Ukraine, which has now been going on for eight years. Just because you call troops peacekeepers doesn't mean they are, in fact, there to keep the peace. They are in an invading army. That's what we're seeing right now of a sovereign country that includes all of the Donbas region, not just part of it. So, yeah, what we're seeing here today is an invasion of another country, something, by the way, we haven't seen in Europe for a very, very long time. And remember, this is only the beginning. There are 190,000 Russian troops ready to pounce to take over what Vladimir Putin yesterday said was really not an independent country, but part of Russia all along.
And Ambassador, how likely is this to turn bloody? Because Ukrainian President Zelensky is saying today he believes there won't be war with Russia. Where does his confidence come from? And what is U.S. intelligence saying?
Well, U.S. intelligence, as far as we know, is indicating that the goal has always been to overthrow the government in Kyiv. As the president said late last week, the decision had been made not just to invade Ukraine, which we are seeing happening now, but to go all the way to the capital, Kyiv. And there's no reason to believe that that's not happening. Vladimir Zelensky has a very tough task. He is trying to keep the country together. He doesn't want people to panic because he wants the economy to continue to function as best it can. But the reality is he's got Russian troops on his territory, new Russian troops on his territory, and they are prepared not only to take over control of all of those two republics that were declared independent and recognized as such by Moscow, which, by the way, about 2/3 of those are still in Ukrainian hands, but they're prepared to go all the way. I think Zelensky knows that. He is trying to remain calm in the face of this extraordinary challenge to stability, not just in Ukraine, but in Europe as a whole.
And as NATO countries consider a range of possibilities in terms of a response, at this point, if it's a choice between war and compromising with Russia in some way, in your view, what should NATO do?
Well, NATO has made clear that it is going to help, or at least individual NATO countries have said that they would help Ukraine defend itself, but it's not going to send troops to defend Ukraine. And I don't think this is going to change. What NATO will do, and what I expect will happen in the next few days, is a quite large mobilization of forces to be sent to the eastern part of NATO, to the Baltic states, to Poland, to Romania, in order to reassure those countries that they remain under NATO protection, to deter Putin from thinking about going further than Ukraine into NATO territory, and to warn him that if he does, then there indeed will be a major war on their hands. But the choice is going to be Vladimir Putin's. It's not going to be by NATO in terms of getting involved in a direct confrontation with Russia.
All right, Ambassador Ivo Daalder, thank you so much for your insight. We appreciate it.